Steve is kind of like a giant lamb. But he will lean over to you at the dinner table and whisper something to you that'll make you sleep with the lights on for a couple of months.
He's come from nothing to being one of our wealthiest writers.
He's an actor when he writes. He's a character actor. I've got a film career because of Stephen King.
I like to have my hooks into the reader entirely. And really, if I had my druthers, I'd have somebody in a situation where they would get to the end of chapter 9 and say, I think I'll sleep with the light on.
He's often seen strictly as a horror novelist, but he's anything but. Fright drives his work and is sort of the engine behind the reader's response to it, but his work is a lot more significant than people give it credit for.
Hello? Anybody here? Do I like to scare people? Yeah, I do. And do I like the idea that I'm referred to and sometimes dismissed as a horror writer? No, I don't.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Stephen. Happy birthday to you.
Quando Stephen King fez 50 anos, o autor de best-sellers americano comemorou o final de sua quinta década não em livrarias cercado de escritores, mas no set de filmagem cercado de atores. E eram astros do porte de Tom Hanks, diretor da prisão em A Espera de um Milagre, adaptação de uma das histórias de King sobre prisões.
And I'm wishing for, I can't say it out loud, that I want this to be the #1 picture and win all the Academy Awards, because that would make the wish not come true. But if I was going to say it out loud, it'd be something like that.
Have we just been Jim?
He somehow is able to really create these characters that are flawed but good, by and large, and also characters who are flawed and evil. You know, or actually are characters who are positive and evil all at the same time. So it's not like, it's not like a matter of one set is good at two shoes, the other people are, district heavies. I think you always are able to understand the motivations of the people who are bad.
It was, definitely.
Nos últimos 25 anos, King tornou-se o escritor preferido dos cineastas de Hollywood. Quase todos os seus livros foram adaptados para cinema ou TV. Ele fez seu nome nos anos 70, com clássicos como Carrie e O Iluminado. Mas como em todo o seu trabalho, as histórias envolvem traumas emocionais profundos e acontecem num mundo que é familiar e até mesmo monótono.
One thing that he did that Steven Spielberg did in the realm of fantasy was ground it in the real world. You see references to brand names, people eat at McDonald's, they shop at Kmart, they do all the things that we do in the real world that you weren't used to seeing in television and films.
He took horror out of the creaky old castle in Transylvania and really placed it next door.
O Maine é o cenário de quase toda a obra de King. É uma região pouco povoada, perto da fronteira com o Canadá. Parece um dos lugares mais bonitos e tranquilos dos Estados Unidos. Mas ele o transformou no estado mais sangrento, apavorante e assustador do país.
Maine is basically a backwoods state, and it's very poor. It's one of the last places in America that's actually a region. In Maine, you have people who have a very distinctive accent, so that outlanders sometimes have trouble understanding them. Most of them dress exactly the same way. They're missing a bunch of teeth. They're wearing feedlot caps. They drive pickups. The rawness is still there. It doesn't have that bland quality that Americans tend to associate with the words suburbia.
The real violence in the United States is committed by people who feel very much like they're on the margins of success or the margin of popularity. And I think King has penetrated what that's all about, and he's found it by staying in Maine.
Stephen King viveu muito tempo no Maine. Foi criado pela mãe na pequena cidade de Durham. Tão pequena que não tem sequer uma rua principal. Seu pai desapareceu quando ele era pequeno.
When I was 2, he left. He just bugged out, gone. And we moved around a lot after that, and I think that she was looking for him, trying to get him to pay support. She died of cancer, and toward the end, she had all this medication, all this dope, and she was stoned most of the time. And when I was visiting her near the end, she said, "You know, Stephen, for a while, just before World War II, your father was a vacuum cleaner salesman." And she kind of chuckled in this dreamy way that people do when they're doped. And she said, "Your father was the only salesman Electrolux ever had who could sell vacuum cleaners to widows at 2 o'clock in the morning." This is where I went to grammar school. We moved here when I was, I think, 8, and I was in the 5th grade. Went to 5th, 6th, 7th grade here, and I was definitely the smartest pupil in my class because there were only 3 of us, and there was one kid who was a stutterer, and the other one was mentally enfeebled, and then there was me. It hasn't changed as much as I thought. This road used to be all dirt when I was a kid. But the Harrington's house is still over there, and that's my aunt's house down there, the brick one. And, we used to pick blueberries in this field until they turned it over for beans, and that's where we went. We didn't have running water either, and that's where we went to get a shower. If we wanted a shower or a bath, we'd walk down across the field and go there. When I was a kid, we'd come down here and fish. Nobody ever went swimming.
Hey, it's not that deep. You can walk across.
One hot day, we decided, what the hell, we're all going to go swimming. There was about 6 or 7 of us down here, just goofing around, and we had our inner tubes and stuff. You paddle around in them, and
You die, Chambers!
this one friend of mine, David Hanna, did a handstand, and his feet came right up out of the water, and he's covered with these black things. They're all over his legs. He's a redhead. He's a little chubby pink legs.
Hey, Vern, there's something on your neck. Yeah, right. I'm not falling for that one a chance. No, Vern, there is something on your neck. It's a leech.
And I took a look at that, and I go, geez, what is that? We got to get out of here. So we all go out, and we were covered with them. We were covered with bloodsuckers. And we picked them off each other the best way that we could, and we're all crying, and this my cousin Robbie Donahue saying, be careful, if you pull them too hard, you'll leave their mouths in them and they'll infect and all this other stuff. So we're pulling them off, and some of them are dropping off because they're full. And then I hear this one kid saying, "Oh my God, look at this." And he's got his bathing suit out like this, and he's looking in his bathing suit. And he's going, "Steve, help me. You got to help me. You got to get it off." I says, "I'm not reaching inside your bathing suit, Chris, man. I'm not doing that. You'll have to." So he reached down, and he brought his hand out, and his hand is just covered with blood. He got the thing off. The thing was huge. It had battened on his testicles. It had gotten in his bathing suit somehow, battened on his testicles. And he said, "Here it is." And he just, his eyes rolled up, and he went right over backward in a dead faint. And about 10 years later, I was working on this story called The Body that became a film, Stand By Me. And I was thinking about that, and I stuck that in there, and I stuck in everything that I could remember from the time. It was no big plan to write about my past, to write about childhood, just a bunch of kids going down a railroad track to find a dead body. And I found that I had something where I could basically hang a lot of the things from my childhood. Boring stories nobody would want to hear otherwise.
If you look at his descriptions of childhood, he represents it as a pretty embattled state, in which mainly one's relief is to be found in the loyalty of those other children who will befriend you, and in the exercise of imagination.
Hey, Gordo, why don't you tell us a story? I don't know. Oh, come on. Yeah, come on, Gordo. Not one of your horror stories, okay? I don't want to hear no horror stories. I'm not up for that, man.
Why don't you tell us one about Sergeant Steele and his battling leathernecks?
Well, the one I've been thinking about's kind of different. It's about this pie eating contest. And the main guy of the story is this fat kid that nobody likes named Davy Hogan. He's like Charlie Hogan's brother, if he had one. Good, Vern.
Millions of children have less than blissful childhoods, but very few of them turn out to be good writers. So it's not causal, you know. It's just that for a child who is a budding writer, the form of the childhood that is lived affects the eventual prose.
Most of his work is rooted in a childhood trauma, a violation of a child. The plot may have to do with a character as an adult, but somewhere in that book, you're going to find that the character is defined by a childhood event.
Harry Davis used to live in this house. He's an old farmer. We used to cut his hay, and he came by. I was walking with my friend Chris, and he's a little skinny man with horn-rimmed glasses. He says, "Where you going, boys? Jump in." We said, "Well, we're just going up the road." And he said, "Jump in. I don't have anything in the trunk but a load of dead bodies." And we kind of went, well, maybe not. Well, he ended up in Togus a few days later. He'd had a total nervous breakdown. It's just, and nobody ever talked about it, just life in the country. He had a kid, you talk about that, Tommy Davis. He used to read the paper. He was about 9. He'd read the obituary column and then cross the names out of the telephone book. It's true. This is where I grew up here. This was our house. The old Hood place. It's changed a lot, but that was my bedroom up there, you see. I wrote 2 books that were eventually published in that room. One of them, Rage, which has since been withdrawn from publication because it's about a kid who takes a gun to school and starts shooting his classmates with them. I've written a lot of books about teenagers who are pushed to violent acts, but with Rage, it's almost a blueprint in terms of saying, this is how it could be done. And when it started to happen, particularly, there was a shooting thing in Paducah, Kansas, where 3 kids were killed in a prayer group. And the kid who did it, that book was in his locker, and I said, that's it for me, that book's off the market. Not that they won't find something else, and not that, you know, I don't think that any kid was ever driven to an act of violence by a Metallica record or by a Marilyn Manson CD or by a Stephen King novel, but I do think those things can act as accelerants. The real question about violence in America, as opposed to, say, the violence in England or Scotland, those places, is you only have to correlate one thing, and that is the difference in the availability of guns. Guns is what it's really about. But there's a whole culture of violence in this country, and I'd be the last person to deny that I'm a part of that, but I'm only a child of my culture.
O fascínio de King pela violência juvenil começou cedo. Aos 10 anos, ele tinha uma estranha pasta de recortes. Lá estava o assassino mais famoso dos anos 50 nos Estados Unidos, Charlie Starkweather. Ele executou uma série de assassinatos em Nebraska e Wyoming com sua namorada de 14 anos, Carl Ann Fugate, fazendo 11 vítimas, inclusive a mãe e o pai de Fugate.
In the cattle town of Douglas, Wyoming, end of the trail for a smart aleck gunman. Components of his arsenal are shown here after he was taken into custody. A trail of 11 killings from Lincoln, Nebraska into Wyoming. A 3-day spree until Charles Starkweather, 19, landed behind prison bars.
He was the first outrider of a new age. And serial murder has become a kind of touchstone experience worldwide, not just in America. But as in so many other things, I think that when it comes to serial murder, America does lead the way. But in the 50s, that sort of thing didn't happen, or at least it didn't happen very often. I kept the scrapbook because I wanted to know what to look for and what to avoid. There was a total 00 in that kid's face. I really did see something in there that was inhuman. But I don't mean inhuman like demonic. It was like 00 on a roulette wheel. Nothing. No good, no evil, just whatever there is, you know, somewhere out there between the Milky Way and the next galaxy. He was, you know, hey, the lights are on, but nobody's home. And I had the idea at 10 that if I sort of committed his, not just his face, but his M.O. to memory, that I could avoid people like that. And I think probably there's a hot circuit somewhere inside. Even at 10, you're the potential of the person that you're going to be. And yeah, I suppose he called to me. As story material, he called to me. Or there was a voice inside that said, this is the guy, you're going to spend your life writing about this kind of evil. So here's where you start. This is the starting line.
Starkweather forneceu a faísca que inflamou o fascínio de King pelo terror. E o fato de ir à escola era seu combustível.
I hated school. Anybody who looks back on the years from 14 to 18 with any enjoyment, I don't trust those people, okay? If you liked being a teenager, there's something really wrong with you. That's my view, because I look back on those days with sort of, please, I never want to have to go there again, because I always felt like I was wearing the wrong clothes. I always felt like I had too many spots on my face, and I really didn't have bad acne at all. I was very lucky that way. When I look back on it from the perspective of my middle age, it seems to me that as a kid I was treated no more badly than anybody else, and better than a lot. And yet, at the time, when you're in that situation, I think that for most of us it feels like a nightmare a lot of the time. We feel adolescence is a difficult time.
O desejo de ser escritor levou King para a Universidade do Maine, onde estudou inglês, mas não pôde aprender muito sobre ser um romancista.
He didn't need to learn how to write fiction in some way. He just sort of knew how to make scenes, how to create characters that you could get interested in, and how to maintain a kind of narrative sort of propulsion that carried you along. He is a serious writer with all the powers of of the pop culture kind of magician, and he's managed to combine those two qualities in a way that seems to me unique. I mean, I don't know of anyone else in recent American culture who's done anything like that.
Foi na Universidade do Maine que King conheceu Tabitha e casou com ela. Eles tiveram um filho e enfrentaram dificuldades para seu sustento.
Steve was very poor. He and Tabby at one point had a trailer that they could barely afford. They really couldn't afford. Steve in college was driving a laundry truck to make some money. He really had to scrape his way through school. Financially, I think he just barely made it. So he and Tabby are completely self-made.
Foi nessa situação difícil, morando num trailer, com sua esposa trabalhando à noite numa lanchonete, que Carrie, o primeiro livro que King publicou, foi escrito. Mas foi um livro que quase não veio a público.
I threw it away and she fished it out of the wastebasket. And I can remember real clearly that night I was in the bathtub smoking a cigarette, which used to be, I mean, this was the 70s, right? And the bathtub, it was a great setup for a trailer. You had the bathtub and then you had the toilet right next, so you could just flick your ashes into the toilet and take a bath at the same time and drink a beer. You had all the comforts of home. All you needed was the transistor radio, and you could have the baseball at the same time. You're living in hog heaven. And she came in and she snapped off the radio and she put down the lid of the toilet and she said, "You ought to go on with this."
Carrie é a história de uma estudante marginalizada que usa seus poderes sobrenaturais para se vingar daqueles que a incomodavam na escola.
She was based on a couple of girls. She was actually a composite. One of the girls made 2 or 3 efforts to break out of that mold of being the low chicken in the pecking order to always being the goat. And every effort that she made, like to change her look or to be vivacious or to get along with other people, was met with a more savage return of fire from the other kids, mostly from the other girls. Both of those girls are dead. Neither one of them made it out of their 20s. One of them married someone and had a couple of kids, and then apparently what I heard from the old hometown was that in the fit of that postpartum depression, she killed herself. And a lot of times women will use pills to do that. But she killed herself. I can remember somebody saying she killed herself like a man with a shotgun. And the other girl died of epilepsy. Got away from the overpowering mother finally and died of epilepsy.
Depois de sair da lata de lixo, Carrie se tornou seu primeiro best-seller e permitiu que Stephen King recebesse $200 mil adiantados. Agora King podia ser escritor em tempo integral e continuou a encontrar inspiração para o seu trabalho nas pequenas ameaças da vida cotidiana.
I came home one day, Joe, my oldest boy, who was in 3 or 4, had done all these cartoons and crayon drawings on this manuscript that I've been working on. And it was this sweet stuff like Hello Daddy and cards and sons and big tall guys, you know, like kids draw with crayons where the legs look like daddy long legs things. And I was thinking to myself, little son of a bitch, I could kill him. I could kill him. Look at this stuff. And that became the basis of The Shining.
Little pigs, let me come in.
Not by the hair on your chinny chin chin. Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in.
The Shining is about a father who basically wants to eat up his child. And any parent goes through those moments. And to my mind, there's a kind of optimistic side to a book like The Shining, even at its darkest, because if a father is raging at a child, at least that father's there. For me, there was just this vacuum. It wasn't good, it wasn't bad, it was just nothing. It was this empty place.
Here's Johnny.
I think Steve was actually hurt by Kubrick's film. The book he wrote was all about alcoholism. It was all about feeling responsibility for a family and not being able to meet that responsibility. It's all about a boiler underneath a hotel that's going to blow and destroy it. That's a tremendous symbol for the Jack Torrance character as well. And those themes were the first things that I think Kubrick jettisoned.
It was a story that came from here. It came right from the heart. I don't know that Kubrick ever directed a movie from the heart. He always directed from here. I never saw a Stanley Kubrick film that came from here. So when you take this and you put it here, you're going to fail. It's that simple.
He seems to have been ignorant of the entire genre, so that when people come on and say, gee, Jack Nicholson seemed crazy from the beginning and we lost some of the tragedy, because to my mind, the arc of the book is that you're taking a decent man and seeing him warped to the breaking strain by this place, this haunted place. And if you want to say it's a haunted hotel, that's fine. You can say it's a haunted hotel. If you want to say it's a haunted place in him, you can say that as well. And if you want to look at it as an allegory, as a symbolic thing, you're welcome to do that. I don't necessarily do one or the other, but I've thought for a long time that what ghosts really are unburied secrets, you know, and bad conscience, and unaddressed psychological problems, which are all things that Jack Torrance exhibits in The Shining.